Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel Scary Interesting One, where we cover all tragic and terror stories. So if you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, plus ring the notification bell to be notified of all new uploads. Now let's get into today's story. In May of 1988, a gathering of jumpers were planning the Little Troubling Sink in Leon Province, Florida. The gathering included 3 separate gatherings that were all in the cavern simultaneously. The jumpers that day incorporated probably awesome and generally regarded jumpers of the time like Parker Turner Bill, Gavin Bill Principal, and others. The goal was to gather land information and study information for the last piece of it. The upstream and downstream passages of the profound segment. The profound segment, as its name shows, was the most profound piece of the cavern, and just to get to the profound segment, a jumper should enter the sink and explore a few very tight limitations: the nut room or the first room, and afterward, the second room. After the second room, the jumpers could advance toward the fourth room by either the third room or the thin, easy route interfacing the second space to the fourth room. At last, the fifth room is where the upper section ends. The upper entry, as of now, was genuinely surely known, especially the initial not many rooms. The upper entry was roughly 700 ft long, and at its absolute bottom arrived at a profundity of around 150 ft anyway. On the floor of the fifth room, known as the very much, was an opening, prompting a close to vertical shaft, taking the jumpers to roughly 170 ft profound, where they went into the sixth room at the profound segment of the cavern. The profound segment incorporates the sixth room, the profound upstream passage, and the profound downstream passage. The upstream passage arriving at a known profundity of roughly 220 ft, which was the functional profundity for this plunging to 220 ft for expanded periods requires not just unique certificates in specialized plunging and an intense comprehension of decompression plunging, yet in addition, particular hardware for this story. The capability and utilization of a dry suit should be perceived. A dry suit is a waterproof suit that gives a pocket of air inside and gives warm security from cold water at profundity. As a jumper dives deep, the water pressure increment, compacting the dry suit and the air pocket inside to keep the jumper from becoming vacuum fixed. As the jumper dives increasingly deep, more air should be added from the chambers. Subsequently, when the jumper is at the most profound, the most air is in the suit anyway. This presents an issue upon a fragrance. The tension beyond the suit diminishes, making the air inside the suit expanding the jumper's lightness to try not to turn out to be too light. The jumper vents behind closed doors through a vent valve, hence the suit can be utilized to control the lightness of the jumper. It is fundamental for the security of the jumper to comprehend the amount of air they possess in their suit and how this influences their lightness as they climb, failing to keep a grip on their suit, especially while cave plunging could, in a real sense, lead to a critical circumstance. The jumpers prepared and entered the Little Troubling Sink on May 15, 1988. After going into the primary room, the jumpers, isolated by Plan Parker Turner and Shirley Bailey, remained in the principal room gathering rock tests, while Bill McFadden, Bill Fundamental, and Bill Gavin headed further into the cavern to the fifth room, then through the upward shaft into the sixth room and the lowest segment. This is where they split. Bill Gavin headed into the downstream passage alone. Bill Gavin was very experienced, and surprisingly, as of now, he was a very notable jumper for his involvement with profound plunging. Gavin was a U.S. maritime specialist who had broad remote ocean and cavern plunging experience. He had likewise planned his own jump drive vehicle, or DPV, the Gavin bike, which with changes and progressions through time gives more noteworthy distance and versatility to buckle jumpers. William Hogarth M., or Bill Main, was likewise a cavern jumping trailblazer. He fostered the Hogarth and Stuff setup utilized in the do-it-right OR. Dire way to deal with scuba, plunging. The Hogarthian technique turned out to be commonly known as it was involved by both Mayne and Gavin, as well as others, jumping as a component of the Woodville-Cuss Plane, Venture or UCUP to plan cave frameworks from Tallahassee, Florida to the Bay of Mexico, including Wakulla Springs and Leon Sinks, the biggest submerged cave in the US. It's putting it mildly to say that Gavin and Mayne were very capable jumpers, and up to this errand the third individual from the gathering looking over the profound segment was Bill McFadden. Bill McFadden was just 32, yet had a lot of jump experience. He had many profound plunges, and was a nearby of Tallahassee. He had 40 makes a plunge Bleak Springs. Of those, 15 were profound. McFadden was likewise known for cave planning and his imaginativeness in changing his psychological picture of the inside of a cavern to a precise guide was prestigious. These three jumpers were explicitly chosen by the gatherings in light of their experiences. The blend of long stretches of involvement of Gavin and Mayne, matched with the neighborhood experience of McFadden, gave perfect certainty that this review plunge would be a triumph. Bill Gavin left the sixth room into the downstream passage to study that region alone. The other two Bills, Mayne and McFadden, began the upstream passage. Mayne drove the way as they gradually advanced through the passage. He tied the rule as McFadden kept. McFadden remained available using a compass for course and taking notes on his overview record as McFadden was endeavoring to explore the passage along the line, while likewise dealing with his compass and taking notes on his overview record on two events. His hardware became caught with the line first. His battery became snared. McFadden couldn't get it unwound all alone, so Mayne needed to return and assist with setting the battery free from the line. Next, McFadden's security reel became trapped. This was immediately fixed, yet the two occasions eased back progress, further easing back progress. Rest was the state of the passage. The upstream roof in places was just 3 ft high, and the floor was very silty. This isn't great for studying. If the jumpers kick up, the sediment perceivability can lessen to zero, making it difficult to play out their obligations. Thusly, they needed to go sluggish and be incredibly mindful so as to not kick up the residue anyway. Much under these troublesome circumstances, they had the option to effectively plan an enormous region of the upstream passage as their gas was running low, fundamental sign that the time had come to head back by, and large, however marginally slow. The plunge had been a triumph. Mayne drove the manner in which back along the rule that he had set before, and again McFadden tracked with how they were still cautious not to kick up sediment, as this can be incredibly hazardous. On the off chance that a jumper loses the line and can't see to hit it up on 2 or 3 events, McFadden halted to overview and update his notes. Mayne just held on until McFadden was done, and they carried on. They were going all the more rapidly, returning to the sixth room, and on several events they kicked up some residue. Mayne was mindful so as to pause and think back and ensure that McFadden was with him when the water was clear. When the perceivability was diminished, the jumpers held onto the rule that Mayne had connected before. This rule drove straightforwardly to the sixth room. In the wake of kicking up residue on 2 or 3 events, perceivability was diminished in those segments of the passage. This happened before the exit of the passage, making perceivability all through the passage zero. Mayne swam through the silty water, then into the unmistakable dim water of the sixth room, and looked out for McFadden, and endlessly held up. A little while later, Mayne understood that McFadden ought to have left the passage and started heading back in to search for him, when he understood a light from behind. Bill Gavin had wrapped up reviewing the downstream passage and was setting out toward the shaft to leave the sixth room. Mayne immediately swam to Gavin and conveyed to Gavin that McFadden was still in the upstream passage and was late for exit. Gavin promptly swam into the upstream passage. He navigated the entry where the residues had been kicked up. It was dark with no ability to see. He kept the line yet looked with his hands, however much he could. Unexpectedly, the sediment cleared and he entered a region with high perceivability and found McFadden was off the line, yet okay. Gavin got McFadden, and taking him back to the line, the two jumpers swam back along the line to the sixth room where Maine was standing by right beyond the passage. They took an extremely fast second. Everybody was okay. How anyway they were coming up short on air. They had invested valuable energy swimming back to look for McFadden. They expected to get back as fast as potential. They knew, as of now, that they would have been barely making it. They made a beeline for the shaft, prompting the lower part of the fifth room, the well at the well. Gavin connected to the jump impetus vehicle, the DPV. If not for the DPV, the probability of them making it out would have been almost zero. As they connected to the DPV to prepare to leave, Mc definitely stood out and conveyed that his air was out. Gavin quickly gave McFadden his long air hose. Now Gavin and McFadden were sharing Gavin's air. Gavin began the DPV, and they started advancing rapidly to the fifth room. As they climbed, they needed to vent air from their evaporate suits. As they motored through the fifth room, Gavin and McFadden were both breathing from Gavin's air. As McFadden was out, Maine was breathing from his air, yet running low in any event, moving along at a good pace utilizing the DV. They were barely making it. As they climbed, Gavin vented his dry suit to try not to become overlight, yet it didn't make any difference. McFadden was clinging to Gavin's complex and had failed to keep a grip on his suit and was overreacting. Maine saw what was occurring and snatched McFadden's legs, trying to control his lightness. When they at last got McFadden halted, the three men had risen 80ft in an exceptionally brief time frame, and the lightness was still off base. They were presently in the chime roof of the fifth room. Gavin checked his air. He was currently down to 1,000 piece. Is was positively enough for a solitary individual to return to the decompression tanks that were organized 700 FD away and utilizing the DPV for drive anyway, with two individuals sharing this air and T. McFadden focused and breathing vigorously. Gavin realized that they couldn't make it here. Attempted to get McFadden to deliver his complex, an offer with Maine, who right now had more air. However, McFadden was focused on and wouldn't deliver Gavin's complex. There was zero extra time. Gavin started up the DV and advanced toward the fourth room, hauling McFadden, while Maine held down McFadden's legs, diminishing drag and stimulating their departure. They endured the fourth room, then the third. Meanwhile, breathing valuable air, yet fairly taken care of. It wasn't smooth, using any and all means, as McFadden's lightness was still not taken care of, and he was focused on, but rather they were moving along at a good pace and advancing toward the decompression tanks. They pursued the faster route into the second room, then through the duck under from the second space to the first. Again, McFadden failed to keep a grip on his dry suit, making the gathering unexpectedly rise from 100F to 60. Right now, Principal understood that he could threaten to use his blade, cut into McFadden's suit, delivering the air, diminishing the lightness. Then Gavin and Maine could drag McFadden to somewhere safe anyway. This could work if they could really drag McFadden to somewhere safe and secure a subsequent chance is that McFadden would overreact when he felt the unexpected surge of cold water. Assuming this happened, it would surely be a capital punishment for McFadden and potentially Gavin on the off chance that they couldn't liberate Gavin from McFadden's grip. So Maine ruled against this and to keep attempting to control McFadden to the exit. However, he knew that helping everybody through the two impending limitations would have been almost incomprehensible. They pushed on, attempting to arrive at the decompression tanks. They made their way to the gallery, then the low Bing plane. Not long before the principal limitation, Gavin's controller began breathing increasingly hard. His air was out. Gavin's psyche was dashing. He considered how amusing it is work everything out such that near the exit yet wind up suffocating McFadden. Changed to Maine's long hose, and Gavin was out of air. Now Gavin and McFadden were unfilled with main, having the main air supply Gavin's lungs were consuming as he saw that McFadden was on main's long hose. And that main just had one controller. Main was currently in charge and taking care of it. Well, he saw that Gavin was battling and immediately gave him the controller. Gavin took 3 enormous breaths, feeling that they would be his last. He was desensitized by the absence of air, focused and seriously confused. So near the exit, and he had surrendered to death out of nowhere. He felt an arrival of strain. McFadden let go. He was oblivious and floating away. He was dead, yet Gavin was as yet unintelligible, and surrendered principle snatched Gavin and medication him through the limitation, sharing them. Controller and Gavin gradually coming to, and turned out to be an ever-increasing number of rational. They arrived at the decompression and oxygen tanks. Without a moment to spare, they started their extremely lengthy decompression, realizing that their companion Bill McFadden had kicked the bucket only minutes prior, and his body was simply underneath them. An examination later uncovered that Bill McFadden experienced an emesis, where nitro-owen gas bubbles structure in the tissue or circulatory system. During fast rising, which happened on various occasions during their plunge, these gas air pockets can be delivered into the mind, heart, or lungs depending on the area of the framed gas, at last bringing about death. Bill McFadden had 40 makes a plunge minimal troubling, and 15 of which were profound. He likewise jumped Cheryl Sink and Sullivan Sink. This jump was incredibly troublesome, yet McFadden was capable and a very capable jumper.